Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to take place in the 19th chapter in the book of Psalms, and the most appropriate foundational proceeding point we want to start with is the defining and explaining the nature of revelation. Revelation is the divine disclosure without which we would have no way of knowing who he is or what he is like on our own independent initiative in our own resources and faculties. We cannot know what divinity knows like apart from what he deigns to reveal to us. And there are three forms of revelation which are touched upon this chapter. The first of which is natural revelation, the second of which is special revelation, and the third of which is personal revelation. And natural revelation includes creation. The existence of creation implies the existence of a creator who is wise enough to implement to conceive a perfect design. The laws of physics are just beyond. They took an omniscient being to conceive them into existence, and also powerful enough to execute his plan into motion and to maintain the created order. And then but it's also extends to conscience, but that's not what is touched upon by the psalmist. He dwells on the natural revelation as revealed in creation. Then there is special revelation. This more broadly entails visions, dreams, and revelations, but it also is recorded revelation. The one that he speaks of is the Torah, or the law, which is an integral component of the word, especially as it would have been understood by the ancient Jews. And then there is personal revelation. So it's not enough to rely upon the recorded revelation. We receive revelation from reading these revelation, and the Spirit will impart illuminatory insights into us to make it all add up and make sense, and to really give us individual. So we are not to rely exclusively on the revelations of others. We are to use these as the foundational reference point for our own personal revelations. We just want to read so the division is the created order as a form of revelation forms the first 6 verses. Verses 7 through 11 are the Torah or law, that's the special revelation, and verses 12 through 14 are the personal revelation. What we want to do is read from start to finish each section, then reread and comment on each one, because there's an uninterrupted, I think it helps to hear the message of the Psalms, which are poetic and pleasing, aesthetically pleasing, to hear them uninterrupted. So we're going to open with the section on the created the revelation of the created order, which begins with the title, to the chief singer, a Psalm of David. David was the author of this and 72 other psalms. He is the most prolific author of psalms. And now we just want to read, and it was meant to be sung, so even though we read these as poetry, these were initially composed and compiled to be sung in liturgical rites at the temple and other places of congregation. So we just want to read 1 through 6 uninterrupted, then break them down verse by verse. Remember, this is the revelation as received through the creative order. The heavens are proclaiming the esteem of El, and the expenses declaring the work of his hands. Day to day pours forth speech, and night to night reveals knowledge. There is no speech, and there are no words. Their voice is not heard. Their line has gone out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. In them he put up a tent for the sun, and it is like a bridegroom coming out of his room. It rejoices like a strong man to run the path. It's rising from one end of the heavens, and its circuit to the other end, and naught is hidden from its heat. So the first verse, so that gets the scope of what he has to say about revelation as received through the natural order. And we just want to reread the first verse and then comment and elaborate more extensively. The heavens are proclaiming the esteem of El, and the expanse is declaring the works of his hands. So as the maker of the heavens and earth, we read of in Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, Elohim, and El is the abbreviated form of Elohim, that is the creative name, the impersonal name of the one who created the heavens and the earth. And the heavens, all the infinitude and the stars and the expansiveness of it all, it is not literally infinite. It does have a definable end, but it is expanding inexorably. And these declare and proclaim the esteem of Elohim, the one who brought it into motion, and the expanse. Now that word is translated as firmament in the King James Version, and it's the first time we read that is Genesis 1:6-7. So the expanse is the earth, which was spoken into existence. Originally the world was one big ocean, but until Elohim declared that he was going to put an expanse in the middle of it, these are the continents and the land. So all the earth, the expanse, we can accurately translate as the earth, declare the works of his hands. He brought it into being. He brought it into motion. He is the source and originator and author of all life, and all things in motion owe their origin to him. So they bear testimony and witness to the one who brought them into motion and the one who brought them into being. Day to day pours forth speech, and night to night reveals knowledge. So as we read, spoiler alert, in the next verse, we read that there is no voice, yet he speaks to us through the visual components of the revelation. And the night to night, so day to day, these are the cycles of a 24-hour period. They consist of day and night. And either or, the knowledge in the speech and revelation is an unending continuum which transcends and goes, repeats the transitions from night to day. Verse 3, there is no speech and there are no words. Their voice is not heard. So divinity, I can testify from personal experience and observation, speaks to me. I have yet to personally encounter a tangible audio voice of him, but he does speak to me through the gentle whisper of the Spirit, the pricking and the convicting of the conscience. So I don't need him to speak to me in a tangible voice to have my faith intact. And even though there are no words and no speeches, and the voice is not heard, he does nevertheless make himself known through the created order and also in personal revelation. Their line has gone out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. In them he has put up a tent for the sun. Now the Apostle Paul in Romans 10:18 interprets and quotes this passage in the perspective of the eschatological evangelical mandate to witness to the good news to the ends of the earth, much as Yahweh's revelation is received or made known or manifest, whether it is received or appreciated or assessed or acknowledged from the end of the earth. It is there nevertheless, and his word does extend to the end of the world. His word is what brought the world and the universe, in fact, into existence. He spoke, let there be life, let there be light, Genesis 1:3, etc. Let there be an expanse or a firmament between the waters and themselves. So this is all spoken into existence. So his word is a creative agent. Now when we speak of the word, it is not limited to scriptures alone. It is also to the voice of divinity. We can read on that in Psalm 29, which spoke the universe into existence, and also the incarnate one is referred to as the Word by John in the opening verse of the Gospel in the first epistle, which bears his name. And it is like a bridegroom coming out of his room. It rejoices like a strong man to run the path. So it's like it radiates like a bridegroom coming out of his room. Now the bridegroom would of course been happy because they are in the midst of marriage. This is a significant turning point in their life, and one they enter into willfully and knowledgeably, and knowing that it's the right move for their life. Now, a lot of married people tend to complain about marriage as they go, but it doesn't begin like that. When they are first being married, it is all a blissful ecstasy, which ultimately diminishes or belittles the problems which await them. But that is not to present a negative or degraded view on marriage. It is only to express the realisms of the full range of human experience. And we, of course, are the bride of the Messiah, so he is our bridegroom. The bridegroom is the male married counterpart. And the strong man to run the path that speaks of its might, its strength, its power, its omnipotence, which alternately translates as athlete, strong man. So we just want to bear that in mind. It's rising from one end of the heavens, and its circuit to the other end, and naught is hidden from its heat. So he's referring to the sun once more, the tent for the sun, which he closes the 4th verse in. It rises from the east and settles in the west. So it's it spans across the whole heavens and the whole earth. And nothing is hidden from its heat except that where its light does not dwell. So once the sun shines and during the day and in the summer especially, there is no escaping its heat. There is nothing we can do, no barriers we can erect between us and it, except, we can minimize we can shelter ourselves in houses and air conditionings, but once the sun reveals itself and makes itself shine more prolifically and densely in certain locations of the earth than other, there is no hiding from it. Now, the 7th through 11th verse refer to the special revelation. Now, the Jews were distinct from the Gentiles in that they were the recipients of special revelation. They had recorded revelation, where the Gentiles mostly only had the nature all around them and their conscience, which functioned as the equivalent of a Torah, a moral compass to convict them when they did wrong and to reassure them when they had done right. So we're going to read 7 and 11 in their entirety, then reread and break them down in verse-by-verse component. The law of Yahweh is perfect, bringing back the soul. The witness of Yahweh is trustworthy, making wise the simple. The orders of Yahweh are straight, rejoicing the heart. The command of Yahweh is clear, enlightening the eyes. The fear of Yahweh is clean, standing forever. The judgments of Yahweh are true, they are righteous altogether. More desirable than gold, than much fine gold, and sweeter than honey in the honeycomb. Also your servant is warned by them, and keeping them there is great reward. So the 7th verse reads, the law of Yahweh is perfect, bringing back the soul. The witness of Yahweh is trustworthy, making wise the simple. The first thing we notice is that he refers to El in the first verse. Now he refers to the more personal covenantal name, which he had revealed himself to Moses, Yahweh. That means I am that I am. And the Torah, or the law, is a reflection of his will and character. And because his character is perfect, so too is the law. These are our governing guidelines or for the Jews to govern and guide their daily interactions, and it ultimately had a restoration purpose for the soul. Now, the law in itself is incompetent to produce our salvation. It is likened to a schoolmaster by the Apostle Paul, a stepping stone to the greater revelation of Yahshua, Messiah, who is the supreme form of special revelation. But the witness of Yahweh, as recorded by his specially selected prophets and authorized canonical authors, their writings and their witness make the simple wise. So from the foundation of simplicity, receiving and reading the witnesses of these, the testimonies of these witnesses has the accumulative effect of making the simple wise. The orders of Yahweh are straight, rejoicing the heart. The command of Yahweh is clear, enlightening the eyes. So the orders of Yahweh are straight. That means upright and wholesome and with integrity. And they are a source of joy for the heart. It causes David's heart to rejoice. Now, the natural man does not rejoice in the fact or reality that they have some external agent telling them what to do and what not to do, more especially. They resist and rebel at that very notion. but the commandments of Yahweh is clear. The commandment, so they're expressed in unambiguous language. There are definite do's and don'ts, and they are expressed in the forms of commandments. And one of the reasons that Yahweh speaks to us in commandments is because the things he asks us to do are seldom easy. Hence, he never resorts to an appeal or a persuasive overtone to he doesn't offer them as a piece of advice, but a commandment to be considered, but a commandment to be obeyed. And if we obey them, we will bring enlightening to the eyes. We will know the straight and narrow and walk and bask in the light, whereas without the commandments, we are in darkness, we are in the abyss, we are in the spiritual graveyard. The fear of Yahweh is clean, standing forever. The judgments of Yahweh are true. They are righteous altogether. So fear of Yahweh is foundational to the worship of Yahweh. We have to fear him, not because we are uncertain about our eternal standing, but just the fact and the potentiality that he does have in himself the power to cast us to hell. This ought to stimulate fear unto faith. Now, when we speak of fear and faith, we generally, in general terms, it is antithetical and antonyms, because no more than any man can serve two masters can fear and faith simultaneously reside in the same vessel at the same time. But fear of Yahweh is clean, and it stands forever because he stands forever. He's an eternal being, and if we fear him, he will endow us with his eternal nature, making us immortal. He is eternal without a locatable, definable point of origin, but we were all born at distinct marks of time, yet we can live forever. That's the difference between immortal and eternal. So he does deign to provide what he can of his eternality with us unworthy creatures. And the judgments of Yahweh are true. That is because he is true. He is the embodiment and essence of all truth. And they are righteous altogether. That means they are righteous individually and collectively. So they are there is no weak link in the chain of commandments. No one is any more or any less valid than any other. They are all treated collectively. They are righteous. They are an expression of righteousness, and they instill righteousness in those who obey the commandments. More desirable than gold, than much fine gold, and sweeter than honey and the honeycomb. So he's comparing the treasure. It's a treasure beyond measure, because gold, as far as earthly or worldly terms, that is the most precious element of the earth. Gold, it is the most monetarily valuable, but the treasure of the word and the wisdom it instills and the righteousness it imparts is of exponentially greater value than any amount of gold, which we can't take the gold with us to the afterlife, but we can take the revelation of that which we have received through the law and our obedience to them. And honey and honeycomb, these are sweet, and we are to feast and consume the word, of which the law is but a component of. More extensively, the word, the scripture, we are to feast on it and consume it and ingest it and absorb it. So the more we read, the more it will be ingrained. It's got to become part of your mind and your thinking, not just your library. Also your servant is warned by them, and keeping them there is great reward. So there's warnings and positive reinforcements and promises. There are also consequential warnings throughout the Mosaic law of the consequences of violating the covenant. But in keeping them there is great reward. So the Mosaic covenant, simplified, is blessings and prosperity for obedience, consequences in exile ultimately for disobedience. So at this moment in time, the exile was some almost 500 years away at the writing of this. So David his reign he was the model monarch of Israel, and his son Solomon's rule represents what may be referred to as the golden age of Israel. So they were still miles away, but the division was splintered as a result of his son Solomon's indulgence in idolatry, and then from there it progressively deteriorated until the exile. Now, the 12th through 14th verse are personal revelations, and remember, we have to have personal revelations. We cannot rely on the revelations as recorded by others. They have to speak to us and impart to us something that is personally meaningful and applicable in our personal lives. So we're going to read the final three verses, verses 12 through 14, uninterrupted, then reread 12 and comment, and repeat the cycle through 13 and 14. Who discerns mistakes? Declare me innocent from those that are secret. Also keep your servant back from presumptuous ones. Do not let them rule over me. Then I shall be perfect and innocent of great transgression. Let the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be pleasing before you, O Yahweh, my rock and my redeemer. So verse 12, who discerns mistakes declares me innocent from those who are secret. Without the foundational reference point of the law, we'd have no way to know, no accurate barometer to know just precisely how far we have led ourselves astray without the law. But it has to be the law itself. It has to be a personal revelation from the reading of the law through which one discerns mistakes. And to be declared innocent, that is the theological term for justification, without which we cannot be sanctified or saved. Also keep your servant back from presumptuous ones. Do not let them rule over me. Then I shall be perfect and innocent of great transgression. So even though David was a king, anointed on high, he owed his anointing to his heavenly king, so he was a servant to his king who ruled on high from heaven. And presumption is the adversary's counterfeit of faith. It presumes that we are entitled to the blessings declared by Yahweh without meeting our end of the covenant, the obedience, the conditions of obedience. So presumption, it claims the promises without meeting the requirements. So it is the adversary's counterfeit of faith, as is also superstitious. But David doesn't want presumptuous ones, the ones who are not men after Elohim's own heart, as he himself was declared by him himself in Acts 13:22, and also implicitly in 1 Samuel 13:14. He wants to be secure in his rule, and he is anointed, and he is mindful of his anointing, and and as long as he is seated on his throne, he not be ruled over presumptuous men. He will be perfect, not sinless, but perfect. He will have progress unto perfection, and innocent of great transgression. So David, he did in fact commit great transgression. We can read of this in 2 Samuel, the 11th chapter, where he seduces a woman who seduced him with his eye by the name of Bathsheba, impregnates her, deceives her husband, and then ultimately kills him. But this may or may not have been written before that. In any case, he was declared forgiven, but not spared the awful consequence of the sins in the chapter which comes after it, 2 Samuel 12. Final verse, let the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be pleasing before you, O Yahweh, my rock and my redeemer. So what we have here is a prayer for proper prayer. We are to pray that the words of our mouth and the meditations of our heart, remember Yahweh discerns the heart, 1 Samuel 16:7, Proverbs 16:2, and 21:2. So he knows the words on our mouth and also what's motivating them, which springs from the heart. And there is no occasion when it is inappropriate to pray, because throughout the book of the Psalms, start to finish, we witness the whole variety and spectrum of human emotion. So even if you are struggling at the moment, that is an opportunity to lift your heart in prayer and to speak the prayers with your mouth. And to be pleasing before him requires that it not be selfish or self-centered, but be oriented towards him. We are instructed in the New Testament in the Lord's Prayer to begin our prayers with his concerns. Then we eventually spread to our needs and necessities, and then ultimately to Satan to keep us away from the evil one and to lead us not in temptation and all that. But the rock and Redeemer, the rock is symbolically significant of a source of strength and stability. And Redeemer, he redeems us from our sin, and in so doing brings us back to him. So I hope that's the reason you're here. All of us require redemption, but that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here. Stay tuned until next time. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.